Welcome back, everybody. Ready for another deep dive. This one is particularly timely, I think you'll agree. We're going to be taking a look at AI and how it might be used in immigration enforcement.
Yeah, especially with all the talk about increased deportations and, with some politicians pushing for that pretty hard, it's definitely a hot topic right now.
For sure. And we've got a lot to dig into. We've got expert opinions, people on all different sides of this issue, plus some legal analysis, even a little bit of historical context. We're
Yeah.
going to try to give you the full picture, like we always do.
Yep. We want to help you understand not only what AI can do when it comes to immigration, but also all those kind of bigger questions it raises, about ethics and about the law, and even, well, honestly, about what kind of society we want to be.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
We're going to lay it all out there for you, all the information, and let you come to your own conclusions. No bias here, we promise.
Right.
All right, so to really understand this whole AI and immigration thing, I think we need to kind of set the stage a little bit.
Yeah, for sure.
Go back to when Donald Trump was campaigning. Do you remember how he was all about mass deportation? Like that was one of his big promises.
Yeah.
And then when he got into office, he appointed all these officials who were, well, let's just say they were known for being really tough on immigration.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, even back then, people were already talking about how hard it would be to actually deport millions and millions of people, just logistically speaking. Like, how would you even do that?
Right. I mean, it's a massive undertaking.
Yeah.
And that's kind of where AI comes into the picture. Because some people see AI as like the key to making mass deportation actually possible.
It's interesting, though, because even before all this, the Department of Homeland Security, they were already starting to focus more and more on AI. They even set up a whole board to figure out like how to use it responsibly, and they put a ton of money in their 2025 budget to open a whole AI office.
Wow. So they're not messing around. It's serious business, huh? I mean, we've all seen how AI is being used at the border already, like with those AI-powered drones.
Right, those are patrolling for people crossing the border without authorization.
But now the question is like, how much further will they go? You know, where's the line?
Yeah. And that's where people start to get concerned. There's this expert, Petra Molnar. She's been studying this issue, and she's worried that AI could create, she actually calls it a surveillance dragnet. And she's worried that that net could reach way beyond the border itself.
Hmm. A surveillance dragnet. So what does she mean by that? Can you like break that down a bit?
Sure. So, like, imagine AI being used not only to track people who are actually crossing the border, but also, like, to monitor anyone who might have had contact with them, like their family members or their friends, maybe even the people they work for. It's scary to think about.
It is. And it makes you think, it makes you wonder about privacy.
Exactly. And another expert, Ramaya Campbell, she takes that concern even further. She says she's worried AI could actually be used to, like, completely automate deportation
Mm.
decisions, which could mean people might not get due process, and it could even end up, like, reinforcing biases that already exist in the system.
When you say sideline due process,
Yeah.
what does that actually mean? How would that even work?
Well, okay, so due process, that means you have certain rights, like you have the right to a hearing before a judge. But what if AI is making these deportation decisions just based on like data analysis?
Huh.
It's like, would people even get their day in court?
That's disturbing. And it makes you wonder about accuracy too, right? How accurate are these systems really?
Exactly. Neil Sahota, he's an AI advisor to the UN, and he's actually pointed out that, even though we already have these systems in place to try to identify people who are maybe in the country without authorization,
Right.
he's worried about, like, what happens if they get it wrong? What if the AI flags somebody who's actually a legal resident or even, like, a U.S. citizen?
That's a really important point. Even if the technology is super advanced, there's still room for error.
Mm.
And in this case, those errors could be, well, life-changing.
For sure. And then, Laura McCleary, she's a policy expert from Unidos US, and she adds another whole layer of concern here.
Okay.
She points out that there are actually known accuracy problems with AI systems, especially when it comes to data about people of color.
Oh, wow.
And that, raises the possibility that U.S. citizens could get caught up in this whole deportation thing, just because maybe they're associated with people who have a different immigration status.
So we've got all these experts raising some pretty serious red flags about using AI in immigration. But I know there are other perspectives out there.
Oh, yeah, definitely. And one that we should probably talk about is there's this immigration attorney, Marina Shapelsky, and she's actually thinks a Trump administration might actually lead to like faster growth in the whole AI sector.
Really? Why? That seems kind of the opposite of what we've been talking about. Why would you think that?
Well, she argues that because Trump comes from like a business background, he might be more open to using AI to make things more efficient, not just in immigration, but everywhere, in all sorts of different areas.
Hmm. So it's not that she necessarily thinks AI is the answer for mass deportation, but she's saying that the whole political climate could actually end up pushing AI development forward.
Right.
That's really interesting. So we have a lot to think about.
Yeah.
Potential benefits of AI in immigration, maybe, but then also some really big risks.
Definitely. And this is really just the beginning, this whole conversation about AI and immigration, it's going to keep unfolding. And it could have some really big consequences for all of us.
Yeah, it does feel like we're at some kind of crossroads, Like,
Hmm.
on the one hand, maybe AI could make things run smoother, maybe even really help with border security. But then on the other hand, there are all these concerns about, well, about fairness and privacy, even about whether we're, I don't know, giving machines too much power over people's lives.
And we can't forget, like, this isn't just some theoretical discussion about technology. This is about, real people, families, communities, whose lives could be completely turned upside down depending on how we decide to use AI in immigration.
Right. Of all the concerns we talked about, which one stands out to you the most? Like, what should we be most worried about right now?
I think for me, it's that AI could actually make existing inequalities even worse. I mean, our immigration system, let's face it, it already has a lot of problems. And I worry that AI could actually just make those problems bigger instead of helping to fix them.
Yeah, you mentioned earlier, like, how AI could amplify bias. Can you give me a specific example? Like, how would that even work?
Okay, so let's say we're using an AI system to look at visa applications.
Okay.
Now, if the data that AI was trained on, if that data already has some kind of bias in it, like let's say it shows that in the past certain nationalities were discriminated against, then the AI system might end up making the same kind of biased decisions, even if nobody wants it to.
So even if we want AI to be fair, it could still make unfair decisions if it's learned from data that's already biased.
Exactly.
That's scary.
It is, and it doesn't have to be nationality. It could be anything, right? Like any characteristic that's been used to discriminate against people in the past, so race, religion, gender, if that's reflected in the data, the AI could just end up repeating those same patterns.
Like what Laura McCleary was talking about, AI systems having accuracy problems with data about people of color.
Yeah.
Seems like these systems could end up just reinforcing existing discrimination.
Exactly. And it makes you think about, like, what kind of society are we trying to build? Are we okay with machines making these huge decisions about people's lives when that information might be wrong or biased?
It makes you think about, like, I don't know, are we sleepwalking into some future where AI is being used not just for law enforcement, but for, like, controlling people,
Yeah.
like targeting people based on their beliefs or even who they hang out with.
And that's not like some crazy sci-fi idea. I mean, we see it happening in other countries, how technology can be used for surveillance to like suppress people. We have to be really, really careful not to go down that road.
So if we are going to use AI for immigration, it sounds like we need some really strong safeguards. What would those even look like?
Well, for one thing, we need transparency. Like, people have a right to know how these AI systems are being used, what kind of data are they trained on, what are the rules they use to make decisions. No more black boxes. We need to be able to see what's happening.
Makes sense. If we don't even know how they work, how can we make sure they're being used fairly?
Right. And we also need like some kind of serious oversight, maybe independent audits, regular reviews, clear lines of, accountability. Someone needs to be making sure that these systems are being used responsibly and ethically.
So it sounds like you're talking about like a pretty big overhaul in how we think about using AI for immigration.
It might be. But if we're going to use AI to make decisions that have this much power over people's lives, then we can't mess around. We have to do it right. No cutting corners when it comes to people's basic rights and freedoms.
Okay, so let's recap. We've talked about the potential pluses of using AI in immigration. Things like making things more efficient, improving border security. But we've also talked about the serious risks, like bias and errors and privacy violations. Even the possibility that AI could be used, I don't know, to control people's lives in some way. It's a lot to think about.
It is. And this isn't just a debate for, like, tech experts or politicians. This is something that affects all of us, and we need to be talking about it.
Right. This isn't something that's going to happen in the future. It's happening right now. The decisions we make today are going to have real effects tomorrow.
Exactly. And we need to make those decisions carefully and make sure we're not forgetting about things like fairness and justice and basic human dignity. We can't let fear or, just wanting to get things done fast get in the way of our values.
I totally agree. So with everything we've talked about, I'm curious, do you think there's any way to use AI for immigration that's both effective and ethical? Is there a path forward where we can keep things secure but also protect people's rights?
I think that's the question, isn't it? Like,
Yeah.
can we find that balance? It's tough. But honestly, I do think if we're really serious about transparency and accountability, and if we keep human rights front and center, then yeah, I think there is a way to use AI where it helps make things more secure without, compromising what we believe in.
Okay, so let's say we do want to try to do that. What would that look like? What would we have to do to make sure AI is used ethically when it comes to immigration?
Well, first of all, like, we got to be really, really careful about the data we use to train these AI systems.
Right.
Like, we got to make sure the data represents everybody, that it doesn't already have bias baked in, and that there are ways to, like, spot and fix any biases that might slip through the cracks because, these systems learn from the data we feed them. Right? So if the data is messed up, the system's going to make messed up decisions.
Makes sense.
hmm
It's like if you teach a kid bad habits, they're going to keep making the same mistakes.
Exactly. And then the other thing is we need to be totally upfront about how these systems are being used.
Hmm.
People need to know how those decisions are being made, what's being considered, what kind of safeguards are in place. No more hiding behind like, oh, it's too complicated. We need to be able to see how it works.
So it's not just about knowing what the system is doing, it's about knowing how it's doing it.
Yeah. And along with that, we need serious oversight. Like maybe have independent audits,
Hmm.
make sure the systems are working like they're supposed to, regular checkups to make sure they're not biased or making mistakes. And somebody needs to be responsible, Like
Yeah.
if something goes wrong, we got to know who to hold accountable. We can't just turn these things on and walk away.
It sounds like it would take a lot of work to really do this right.
Yeah.
Like we'd have to completely rethink how we approach AI and immigration. Really put ethics at the top of the list, along with security.
It would. But I really think it's worth it. This technology is powerful. It could do a lot of good, but it could also do a lot of harm if we're not careful. We have to be smart about this and make sure we're protecting people's rights because this isn't just about technology. It's about, what kind of society we want to live in.
Well said. And that's a good takeaway for our listeners, I think. This is a really complicated issue. There's no easy answers, but the more informed we all are, the better. And, talk about it, have these discussions, and to keep our leaders accountable. That's how we can make sure AI is used for good.
Exactly. And this isn't like a one and done conversation. The technology is changing all the time, so we need to keep learning and keep asking hard questions and pushing for, a future where AI is used to make things more fair for everybody. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.
Yeah. Thanks, everybody, for listening. Keep learning about this. It's so important. And let's all work together to make sure that technology is used to make the world a better place, not, the other way around.